Welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health, a podcast of resources for restoring vigor and vitality, bringing you top influencers in the men's health arena, case studies of men who have succeeded and how they did it, and cutting-edge teaching on men's health issues from America's leading men's health guru, Dave Skattum. Get ready to take steps towards good health. Here's your host, Dave Skattum.
Hey, welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health. I'm so glad that you've joined us in this podcast, and I get so excited just thinking about this latest thing I'm doing where I'm just talking to guys that I know about their story and their journey to good health. And there's so many different rabbit trails and routes and journeys that people have taken to get to the place of good health. And all of us have, spectrums of good to bad health, and all of our different areas of health in our life are all on that spectrum somewhere. And it's just neat to hear people talk about where they've been, what they've been doing, their dreams for the future, and things that have impacted them in the past. I get so excited about this. And I'm especially excited today to be interviewing a guy that I met quite a few years ago. His name is Stephen Harris. And Steve, I'm so glad that you've come to spend a little bit of time with us on this podcast. Welcome to the 4 Pillars of Men's Health.
Thanks for having me. And my name is Stephen Harris Weiel, just FYI.
Stephen Harris Weiel. Thank you. I knew that. All right. Sounds good. Thanks for correcting me on that. Hey, so I just want to tell everybody a little bit about you, Steve. I met you years ago in, I think the first time I met you was in a speakers club that we were both involved with, and got to know you and just fascinated by the way your mind works. And I'm just really excited to hear what you have to say about these topics of men's health today. But a little bit about Steve. I think his passion, from what I know about Steve, is his passion for teaching and helping people learn. Steve has got a degree in applied mathematics and statistics, and he is currently a realtor and a professor or a teacher at Montana State University. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about men's health, Steve. And I always like to start these podcasts off by just find out exactly some personal stuff about you. And I start off like this, and I say, Steve, what is on your front burner? What is getting Stephen Harris Weiel out of bed in the morning?
Well, recently, it's pretty obvious right now. It's a super easy answer for me. My brother and his wife just had their first baby on the 11th, so it's the 16th today. So 5 days ago,
wow.
I officially became an uncle, and I've been waiting.
Congratulations!
Thanks. Yeah, I've been waiting for that
That's
forever.
Cool.
They got married in 2008, so it's been like 12 years that I've been, talking to them and being like, when am I going to be an uncle? And it finally happened, and I couldn't be happier for them and my whole family, and we're all just super stoked about it.
Cool. Is it a boy or a girl?
It's a girl, yeah. Jessamine Joanne Weiel is her name.
Wow. So is she nearby so you can see her a little bit, or is she long distance?
Unfortunately not. Yeah, they live in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh,
and
cool.
Hopefully they'll be coming up next month. Yeah. They'll be spending a bunch of time here, and we'll all get to hang out and dote on our new member of the family.
That's pretty cool. Whenever somebody gets a new family member, it's almost like a miracle, seeing a new human being come into the world and join a family and be a part. And it molds them, but it also impacts all the family members. So that's pretty cool to hear about your excitement for that, and it's going to be neat to see how things progress in the future. So, hey, I'm a kind of an amateur history buff, and so I really enjoy reading history books and studying past history. And whenever I think of men's health, my mind kind of always wanders back to the Greek and Roman era. And in my mind, I can just imagine some of these amazing sculpturists that take this big chunk of marble and they chisel away at it, and eventually they produce what in their mind is this ideal picture of what a healthy man or a perfect man would look like. And I'm just curious, Steve, if you could put a man up on one of those Greek or Roman pillars and say, you know what, according to Steve Harris Will, this is the perfectly healthy man. Well, tell me, what would that man look like? Describe that person.
Oh, wow. That's a fun one. That's an interesting one. I mean, there's of course physical attributes, and it's interesting that you bring up like the Greeks and the Romans and their perspective of what the perfect man was, because I think if you think about the mindset of our society and our culture, it can be a great thing to have that sort of man who is up there on that pedestal and who you want to be like and emulate and work towards becoming. And also at the very same time, like, it can be very disconcerting to be like, this is where I am, and I see that person up there, and it seems like an almost impossibility to reach that at times, and that can be, that can be so detrimental and so hurtful to actually, making progress. So I guess I'd throw that out there first and foremost, and then if I want to talk about the attributes of who I put up there, I thought about this with the if you could have a magic wand, what would you do for every man to help us be a bit more healthy? And the thing that comes up is humility. Like, humility, I think, is that quality, that trait that is often misunderstood. And I know that as a young man, I misunderstood it. I thought that humility was all about being like not saying anything good about myself. It's basically like putting myself down. That's humility. And that was a mistake, for sure. So recognizing that humility is more about being real, about being honest. It's about being honest about where you are and not being bigger or smaller. So there's that balance there too of like don't be putting yourself down, and also don't be so cocky that it's unrealistic. The other thing I think about humility that gets misinterpreted is, I think a lot of men think being humble is being weak. There is that association of weakness with humility, and that is also just an error and not true. It's being humble has a lot of being humble is in asking for help, right? It is making yourself less so that you can get the help that you need. And there's that pervasive myth about men that like, oh, we're never going to ask for directions because we're too proud. And it's like, man, there's so many things in life that would be way, way, way easier if we just ask for help.
Yeah. Hey, when as you're describing that, Steve, when I was growing up, one of the shows that me and my brothers always watched, I think it was every Saturday morning, I think it came on. It was this show called The Lone Ranger, and it was about the law enforcement guy that had this big horse. He wore a mask, and he did almost everything by himself. And he did have this guy, like a sidekick named Tonto. It seemed like he always got beat up or whatever. But this Lone Ranger was like, he could get out of every situation. He knew what to do in every situation, and every time it worked out for him. And that I think that's really ingrained in us, maybe especially in Western society, where we need to stand up and be a man. And I was saying, as I've gone through life, I've found that's not really, successful people are really not that way. And I think that just really dives right into your whole thought on humility and how critical it is for us to really have a positive but accurate self-view of who we really are. And I'm just curious. I'd like just peel that back a little bit. When you think, so the question was, what is the perfect healthy man? And you said humility. So how does humility make you healthy?
It's humility makes you healthy in that it's the ability to recognize that you can make mistakes and be wrong. And it's interesting you gave that example too about the Lone Ranger. Is like you see him just making the right choices all the time, and everything works out for him. So it's also breeding this notion that you have to be right all the time. And one of the best books I ever read, and one of the most influential books I'd say for me is called Being Wrong. It's by Catherine Schultz, and it opened my mind to really embracing being wrong and making mistakes and how important and valuable those are. And also, it helped me to really separate myself and my ego from like error and mistakes, because it's so easy and common and part of being human to make mistakes. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there. You mentioned, okay, so how does humility help you be healthy? It's in being able to both ask for help and accept help and criticism when it's important. And also, I think one of the other really important things is relationships, and you build better relationships, I think, with other people when you come into the relationship with a sense of humility. So, I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of different information, and along those lines, there's one that pops up into my mind about addiction, and basically kind of the psychological studies on addiction that have happened in the past and the new studies. And kind of the conclusions were that the opposite of addiction, I think it was a TED Talk actually, like the opposite of addiction is community, is like relationships, connection.
Really?
So the studies they had with like rats were basically that the very early on studies just had rats in a cage, and they had one drip bottle with drugs and they had one with just water. And of course, like a rat by itself has nothing else to do, and it's just going to go and take drugs all the time. But when you did the same sort of study with the drug water and the regular water, but it was like a vibrant rat utopia with a bunch of other rats and like fun things to do, like none of the rats went to the drugs.
Really?
So
interesting.
And of course you can't do a one-to-one relationship between human and rats, but I think we see that in the real world too, that it's, if you don't have good relationships, you don't have a sense of community, you don't feel like you belong, you don't have a sense of purpose or meaning, then like what else are you going to do other than turn to drugs or some sort of other addictive behavior? Yeah.
Wow. Man, just in reflecting on that, when you talked about that was a real eye-opener for me. The opposite of addiction is community. And I think so many times I see in my own life and people around me addictive things. Like you could be addicted to many things. And it's almost like an addiction is almost like causes like not a physical, but like a hemorrhage in your life. It like blows a certain area out of proportion in your life. And what you just told me was the antidote to that, to addiction, is building community and having people around you, like a support system, like a relationships, healthy relationships with other people. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I just Googled it too. It's the TED Talk is called "Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong," and the kind of conclusion is that it's the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. Yeah.
Wow, that is really good. writing that stuff down. So you went from you were talking about humility, and then we went to community and relationships, and so many of these interviews that I've been doing, guys are bringing that up, where it's so important in people's minds that we develop relationships, and with men and women. But I think a lot of these guys talk about having good healthy relationships with other guys, and so if that's so healthy, why is it that so many of us guys are out there walking around like the Lone Ranger? If we know that, maybe we don't know that, I don't know. But what is the disconnect there? Why are we buying into the Lone Ranger philosophy and not becoming more connected?
Well, I think a part of the answer to that is in your question. It's because we have things like the Lone Ranger. We have things in our culture that really, they express that sort of narrative. Like the strong man is the man who's always right and, is totally fine doing everything on his own. The Lone Ranger, like that's the ideal man. And we get that in our heads. And, I think about myself, and I'm definitely not proud of who I was, and I'm super happy that I'm where I'm at today. But thinking about me, I think I was so competitive as a kid. Like that's part of the reason why I found it challenging, I think, to have good relationships with other men, is I always saw them as competition. And I mean, some of that is in our DNA too. Like we literally are. We have been competing with other men for the existence of our species, like a competition for women and that sort of thing. So there's some of that's innate. I guess the thought that pops into my head that's the biggest bummer is I feel like I missed out for a long time on the shortcuts to success, because I now recognize that one of the best shortcuts to success is like you find the person who is doing what you want to do better than you are, or the best. You think of the person who's doing what you want to do the best, and you learn from them. Like you befriend them, you build a relationship with them. And I can just think of me as a kid, like I would have been so intimidated, and I would have been so competitive that I would have probably, without even knowing who they were as a person, I probably would have just hated whoever that person was. Like, oh, you're better than me. Like, and
you're the enemy.
Terrible. That sucks. Yeah, you're the enemy. Like, you're my competition instead of like, you're somebody who I could really learn from.
Yeah. And, another thing I was just thinking of when you were talking about that, I was thinking, the disconnect between, this Lone Ranger thing and us knowing that that's not really the most healthy way to go. Maybe it loops clear back to what you first said was humility. Maybe we're so proud and arrogant, or whatever, I don't know what the right words are, but maybe it's humility or lack of humility that gets in the way of actually building a healthy relationship with another person.
A lot of times, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
that's a big factor.
Yeah, good stuff, Steve. That is really good stuff. So now let's maybe we won't totally flip the coin because we talked about this a little bit, but so now we've talked about the healthy guy. He's a person of humility. I think you mentioned, humility, having a good community. Connection with other people. So what do you think it is that makes men unhealthy?
What makes men unhealthy? I would say, and I guess I'll go to one of the questions you sent me was, what makes you a healthy man? And I would say it's mindset. And I think mindset makes men, and I mean, women, I think on the same part too. It's like what makes people unhealthy is poor mindset.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about this. And again, this is something that I think I recognize was an issue for me for a large part of my life. Is just as a human, like it feels good to be a victim. Like it does. Like there's a feeling of like you get attention for that, and you kind of like don't have to take responsibility at times. And I know that, you know, I was always a big soccer player, and I just know as a kid there were many times where, you know, I would get fouled, I would get injured, and I would make a much bigger deal out of it than it really was, because
the loser's limp.
Because I wanted, exactly, totally. You know, I wanted the attention, I wanted the pity, and for some reason that felt good to me. I mean, I think back on it now, and I'm like, that is ridiculous. That's crazy, and it's that mindset. Like, how do you get out of that mindset of victimhood, of like wanting to be like, well, you know, I'm not successful because A, B, C, D, and E. And like, if you think of anybody in the world could say that. Like, anybody has the opportunity to say, like, these are the reasons why I'm not getting to where I want to be getting, or I'm not successful, or I'm not healthy. Mm-hmm. You can point to many different things, but it's like, that's the wrong mentality to have. It's, can you shift your mentality to be like, hey, these are the things I can do to improve my success, my health. And if you're focusing on those, and you're not focusing on like what's wrong or what is holding you back, then you're at a big advantage there.
That's pretty cool.
So my mindset, I would say, is the main thing that.
Yep. Hey, so let's.
I think it's important to note.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was saying, I think it's important to note that it's an extremely challenging thing to change. Like it took me a long time, and I know that I have a lot of conversations. I wanted to kind of bring this up. One of your questions is, what's your biggest struggle with maintaining good health? And like, I know this is kind of, struggle versus challenge is a word change that I think embodies like just one of my core beliefs. And in that, like, we can shift and change our mindset and our lives through our language. And when you use language like I'm struggling, as opposed to I'm finding this challenging, like, you can use them interchangeably. However, the meaning of them is actually quite a bit different. One is really a victimhood sort of mindset, like, oh, I'm struggling, you know, things are pushing me down, things are terrible, as opposed to like, these are challenging times. Like, I have challenges that I can overcome, that are great, you know, challenging. But
interesting, yeah. So just that's like self-talk. I think you're describing self-talk. How are you talking to yourself? What is your mindset, and what kind of things are you saying about yourself? That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's huge. It's extremely powerful, and I don't do enough of it, really. That's something that I would like to do more of, is what's called daily affirmations. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of daily affirmations, but it's just like sitting down and saying positive things about yourself, which, again, going back to humility, I think there's this sense that, like, oh, you don't do that because, you know, you don't want to, you know, stroke your ego. And it's like, well, it's not about that. It's about being real and honest with who you are. Yeah. And who you want to be as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So would you say, because that was my next question, I was going to get a little personal with you. Would you say that self-talk and the way you are changing your mindset, are you saying that's one of your biggest struggles?
Not a struggle. Again, like, I definitely don't believe. I don't believe that I have struggles.
You busted me.
No, it's okay. But this is, it's not busting it, and this is part of the challenge for me too. Is bringing these sorts of things up in a way that doesn't hurt people's sense of self or whatever, because it's that's, I guess that is a huge challenge for me, is communicating these sorts of things appropriately such that it doesn't run into like, oh, you corrected me. Like, I would love to be better at that sort of thing, and that's what I constantly work on. And I think personally, like, for me, it's a constant battle and challenge to like change my language. So even there, it's a thing where in conversation daily, like, I know that I still make what I would call like mistakes in my language using a word like struggle. And what I do is I work on, like, in the moment, changing that right away. And it's that habit of like recognizing what I'm saying, because knowing it enough isn't going to do anything, right? You can't just know something and be like, okay, I know that, perfect. Like, it has to be a practice. And for me, that's my main focus and challenge, is like always constantly practicing that to change my language and to change my life through that.
Wow, that's really good. So I'm curious about this, because I mean, you're getting down to some pretty fine-tuned stuff, or from my perspective anyway. How do you, I mean, we have all these thoughts all day long. We have thoughts, that self-thoughts, and we're taking on other people's thoughts, and some of them are accurate, some of them aren't, some of them are condemning, and some of them are uplifting. So how do you go through the day and not be overwhelmed with trying to, how do you live a healthy life and at the same time confront those things that are coming at you either from yourself or from your environment? How do you have any tools or techniques for doing that?
I mean, tools and techniques, definitely just the changing language as it happens, because like I said, I constantly, and we will constantly make mistakes, and being forgiving with oneself when they happen, and also like in the moment, changing, doing something differently. That's really important. The other thing that popped into my mind when you were talking about that and asking that is, intentionality. So, the thing that I, thinking about like who's saying stuff and where and how, and whether it's positive or negative, I suppose I structure my life I work to, because I'm not perfect at this either, like I work to be very intentional with what I do with myself and my life, and a part of that is being intentional with the people who I'm engaging with. And like, I recently had an experience where I had shared something and I had some kind of blowback to it. And they were people that, like, are friends of mine, and at the same point, like, what they were saying was so like off base to me that it was like, well, I don't feel any need to engage with this in any way other than like thanking them for sharing their perspective or engaging with me, but like I don't need to engage with that because it's not something that I feel is productive. And I think it's important too to note in that instance that it's not like they just disagreed with me and I don't want to hear people who disagree with me. That's not the case. It's that I don't think that either of us would have, well, it wouldn't have been worth my time, and it's not my mission, I think, to engage with a person in the sort of way that they were kind of engaging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I should get you back on here. We could just do like a whole session just on that. That's pretty heavy and deep and wide. So really, the way we process this stuff is so it's such a big deal. So thanks for bringing that up. Hey, so Steve, I just placed this big crown on your head. You are Steve, the king of the world now, and you have a magic wand. You referred to this earlier, and you're looking around and you see all the things that are happening in the world of men's health, and you just came up with the most brilliant way of solving this whole problem. What kind of thing would you do with this magic wand to have the most impact on the most men in the area of men's health?
Yeah, I would go back. I'd go back to humility. I would instill humility into like every man. That's what my magic wand would do for sure.
Huh. Really? Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast just in itself. Talking about
we've got like 3 or 4 here, I think.
I know. All right. Hey, well, let's. We're about out of time here, Steve. So let's wrap this up this way. I don't know if you want people to get in touch with you, or I don't know if you have any projects going on that you want people to be aware of, or whatever. But if you could just wrap this whole thing up with some closing thoughts on men's health and what we've been talking about, and if you want somebody to get a hold of you, how we do that, and if not, you can just blow past that. But just kind of wrap this up with some wise words of wisdom from Stephen Harris Weiel.
Ooh, wise words of wisdom. 3 W's from the Weiel man. I guess it'd be like always know that you're going to have challenges. Challenges will always be present. You can always overcome them, and you have immense strength yourself. And if for some reason that is not sufficient, then there's always help. Like there's just, living in America, in the society we live in, I think this is another just mindset thing. Like I firmly believe that there is help out there, and there are choices you can make to always improve your situation just by asking for help or finding the right people. It may take more effort than you might want to put forth, but like effort and help, you can accomplish and do anything.
Hey, so Steve, man, I know you have a lot of great things going on in your life. How do people get a hold of you? How do people see what you're doing? What are some ways that people can get invested with Stephen Harris Weiel?
Sure, yeah. Right now I'm doing a lot with posting just kind of 1-minute Instagram videos called Improve Language to Improve Life. So my Instagram handle is improve_language, I think, something like that. You can always look me up, Stephen Harris Weiel. I'm the only Stephen Harris Weiel in the world. And then those also automatically get posted to my Facebook page for the podcast that I used to or that I still have but haven't been doing much with recently, which is You Are Admirable, is the interview podcast that I used to have. But those videos are also getting posted to on Facebook.
You've been listening to The 4 Pillars of Men's Health with Dave Skattum. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit the4pillarsofmenshealth.com.